others?
So if you're going to enable, so one of the things that's not enabled is every single command that's run. While that could be great for auditing purposes, it may just end up crushing the system in terms of performance. If you're doing network connections, but maybe it's a publicly facing web server, you might want to audit it and say, let's exclude the Apache or Nginx web process from that particular thing, because we already know that it's going to receive a ton of connections, and we don't need to have a log of every single IP address that connects there. We have other logs that have that information, and so we may not want it for that particular thing. But at the same time, if someone does end up Trojanizing or backdooring one of your web servers, you would be blind to that. So it's one of those you have to determine what is the level of risk of ignoring certain things versus the performance by logging everything.
Gotcha. Are there any other suggestions when it comes to configuration? If someone was interested in just the most lightweight experience, getting as much benefit as possible with minimal impact?
I think that's really a hard one, because it really determines on the role of the system that they're monitoring, how that system is interacted with from their user environment, whether there's a lot of automation going on, a lot of manual interaction going on. But I think starting out small, is always a good thing, because you can always move up without hurting anything. If you start out too big, it might be really hard to start, paring it down and figuring out exactly what you need to pare down. As you start out small, every time you're making that incremental change, you get to see what additional features or what additional logs you're collecting, and you can figure out, is that going to be useful to you in your environment or not? And you can always say, of the 100 rules that were enabled in the particular framework I'm looking at, I only want to enable half of those or less than half. It's a lot easier to make that decision then.
Fair enough. Another broad question, but how do some of our other beats complement Auditbeat? For example, someone asked about MetricBeat specifically, but are there certain types of use cases where you might look at something like MetricBeat or FileBeat and say, you can accomplish certain use cases by using them in combination?
Definitely, especially with FileBeat, and we have a lot of modules for things like Nginx and Apache. And this is where, instead of auditing all of the network connections into either one of those two web processes, you could use FileBeat to monitor the logs from there, and you would have not only the detail of the IP address that connected to it, you would also get some of the URL string and some more information that Auditbeat wouldn't collect from there.
Super.
Yeah, and I think specifically for MetricBeat is great for collecting, as it has the name metrics. So things like CPU utilization, things like disk utilization, memory, as well as any kind of application-specific information that we have pre-built modules for, like for your databases. And so I think it's useful to run these as well, and to monitor just the performance as well. And then the nice thing about Kibana is you have UIs, like in Kibana, you have apps that display all of the information, and you can quickly switch back and forth between them. So if you really want to have like a single pane of glass where you see everything, then yeah, it makes sense to run the different beats. Each of them are meant to be independent. Each of them are meant to collect different kind of information. There shouldn't be too many overlap. So yeah, I think if you want full visibility into what is going on, it makes sense to run. It makes sense to run more of them.
Well, let's talk about how we can do that. So we have a couple questions related to the same thing. And first is there a central way where the rules can be updated? Someone else asked, is there an API, some sort of interface where I can push the changes dynamically so that I can enable rules and disable them at will?
Yeah, it's a good question. For Auditbeat at the moment, we don't have central configuration management in that sense, in the sense that like you could just centrally do something in Kibana, for example. It's something that we're working on. It's something that we have for some of the other beats. But for Auditbeat, we don't have it at the moment yet. What you can always do, of course, is you can use whatever deployment automation configuration system you're using, be it Ansible or Puppet or Chef, and you can use that to roll out basically centrally any kind of configuration changes. All of the configuration is in one file, the auditbeat.yaml file, or you can name it something else, but it's in one file. So that file you can centrally manage using any